Welcome to the Brehl Politics Podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Brehl. Thank you for joining us. It's been a while, but we're back. And this week, we'll be talking about automation. Specifically, how it is putting jobs that people could depend on for generations in jeopardy, and also how it is challenging some people to take matters into their own hands. It has been a decade since the Great Recession of 2008, and while unemployment is very low, underemployment is still quite high. A large number of people are employed, but wages are not keeping up with expenses, and many of these people do not work enough hours. According to the Chicago Tribune, more than half of working Americans consider themselves underemployed, and according to Statista.com, when adding to the unemployment rate the amount of workers who are looking for more hours, the underemployment rate works out to 12.5%. This does not even include the number of people who simply gave up looking for work. As automation increases, it will only be more difficult to find employment. The private and public sector has begun turning to machinery at a very quick pace. The post office and McDonald's both use kiosks, supermarkets use self-checkout, and even high-paying reliable jobs like welding may soon be automated. Yes, automation does create new jobs, for example, repairmen and women for the machinery, and it does make products cheaper for consumers. But people who have invested time and money learning particular trades will be left behind. We will discuss solutions to this problem in future shows, and these solutions include job training programs, universal basic income, and the negative income tax. But today we'll be looking at how some people are fighting back, not by looking for more employers, but by becoming their own employers. Some now drive for Uber, others host guests in Airbnb apartments, but few things beat online retail. While Amazon and other websites may be bad for stores, it is helping ordinary people open their own businesses, with great ease because of the fact so few employees are needed. My dad recently published a book on Amazon. Ashley Hargrove sells clothing on Instagram. And Raphi Cooper sells a new almond-based breading called Cooper's Crumbs online. Without a doubt, the ease of monetizing new ideas using the web is sparking ingenuity. We'll be right back with Cooper himself, where we will talk about how he started his new venture, Cooper's Crumbs. Welcome back to the Brehl Politics Podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Brehl. Thank you for joining us. And we are here with Raphi Cooper, CEO of Cooper's Crumbs. So, tell me, Raphi, first of all, thank you for coming on.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful.
Glad to be here.
What exactly is Cooper's Crumbs?
So Cooper's Crumbs, it's an alternative to breadcrumbs. It's made out of almonds right now, and we're working on a seed-based variation also out of pumpkin seeds. But I came to this because typically breadcrumbs contain about 20 to 25 grams of carbohydrates, along with, multiple artificial flavors, colorings, Lord knows what ingredients. It sounds more like a science project that's in there than what should be in your food. So I was looking for a way to make, breaded chicken without the carbs and the added salt and calories and all the, undesirable things that are in typical breadcrumbs. So I started experimenting with different nuts and different nut flours, but I came to discover that there really wasn't anything out there, and I came to discover that nut flour alone wouldn't really do it for breading. So I started putting two and two together. I started a little bit of trial and error, and thank God we're at this point now where we're happy with our formulas. We have our texture, we have our flavors. So yeah, we are Cooper's Crumbs.
Wonderful. Why don't you tell me about some of these flavors you have?
Okay, so typically when you go to the breadcrumb aisle, you'll see one of three different types of breadcrumbs. You will see like an original, almost like a salt and pepper flavor. You don't want too much going on in there, but enough taste that you can really have it on its own, or you can customize it. You can add a little bit of fun to it if you want. This is an Italian flavor, so like I said, in most situations where you see breadcrumbs in an aisle in a grocery store, you'll see an Italian blend. So this blend has basil, oregano, rosemary, parsley, and it's great. It really gets the job done. So this is like if you really don't want to season it at all yourself and you're kind of looking for a convenient way to have something that's delicious, these are a really great option. And then our last flavor is the spicy. So this has a little bit of cayenne pepper in it, and it's got a little bit of red hot chili flakes and cumin. So it's not just spicy, but it's also got some flavor to it. This is also really good if you're looking for that kind of a taste. And it's not too hot, but it'll give you a little kick. So these are our three flavors right now. And like I said, we're working on a pumpkin seed base because there's a lot of nut allergy out there, especially in schools and restaurants. People are concerned about cross-contamination. So we're working on that now. We'll see where it comes, and we'll see what kind of a base we have for that flavor. But yeah, we're really a plant-based alternative to breadcrumbs almost.
Wonderful. I feel like the pumpkin seed version would do really well because there are a lot of people who not only want fewer carbs, but they also don't like gluten.
Yeah.
And there are also people who have a lot of allergies, both gluten and nuts. So I feel like the pumpkin seed
100%.
would be very useful indeed. I'm looking at the ingredients and I see it's not like it's not longer than the Constitution, the ingredients list.
Yeah. We try to keep it short.
No monosodium glutamate. It just says almonds and spices.
Yeah.
So
sometimes simple will get it done, and in this case, I think a lot of breadcrumb companies have kind of missed the message about it. Breading should be in addition to your food. It shouldn't be too heavy where it's got 20 grams of carbohydrates and it's got riboflavin and thiamine and vegetable oil. Kind of keeping it simple, stupid here, but it really goes a long way, and I think it really will make a difference in the long run.
Wonderful. So why don't you tell us about your background? Any jobs or internships you have, where you go to school, where you grew up?
So, I'm from Long Island. I grew up on Long Island, lived there all my life. But I have a lot of family that's in the food business, and I've been around food, for as long as I can remember. I started waitering in high school at parties, and then in college, I got a call from my friend's father, who owns a kosher butcher right by my house, and he asked me if I wanted to work on the weekends and part-time and just to get some spending money in college. And I said yes, and I've been working there for the last 3.5 years, going on 4 years now. I just graduated. And there, I really discovered I like the idea of combining kind of food but also dealing with people. And I think those two things are something that I knew I wanted to have in my future in some way, shape, or form. And then while I was working there, I started coming to this idea. And that's actually the first store that we're in right now is that store that I'm currently working at on the weekends. And thank God I've been given an opportunity there, and it's been doing well, and we hope to continue and get to other stores. But I always liked food. I always liked cooking, and when after I graduated high school, I became much more into health foods. I tried to limit my carb intake, limit my gluten intake, limit my starch intake, limit added sugars. So a lot of those elements are in typical breadcrumbs, and I didn't want to give up the ability to have breaded chicken, breaded fish. Or meatballs with a little bit more texture. So that's really the premise for what I came to. And we'll see where it goes, but I'm really excited for it.
That's wonderful to hear. What else would you say inspired you to create this new business? I mean, I know that you're part of the Business and Liberal Arts program at Queens College.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How much of a role would you say that?
I think that's played a large role. I've definitely taken classes in college that have really opened up my mind to creativity in terms of marketing and in terms of writing up a business plan, in terms of figuring out accounting costs and things like that. I think the entrepreneurship combined with the disciplines that that I have gained while I was at Queens College, along with I majored in economics, and I think that also helped out a lot, in terms of pricing and figuring out things like that. But I think the main inspiration really came from seeing that there is a lack in the market and seeing that this is a time, where I'm young and I don't necessarily have all the commitments and all the burdens that, people, once they graduate college and they get a job and they have a family and they have responsibilities like that, they can't really kind of put themselves out there not knowing what would necessarily be next. So in my last, year and a half of college, I kind of decided, if not now, when, and really put pen to paper on this and see where to go with this. And it's been really exciting, and I've learned a tremendous amount. And even if this isn't what I end up doing, full time in the future, I think you gain a tremendous amount of experience from trying to start a business, and
Absolutely.
from the networking and understanding all the different aspects that are involved. Accounting, legal, regulations, marketing, finance. So there's just so much that it all encompasses, and thank God it's been a tremendous experience so far.
I imagine so. I mean, you've kind of taken on the role of a Renaissance man here because you've been involved in, you've had to have experience with certain laws. You've had, you actually had to make the product yourself.
Yeah.
You've marketed the product. So I want to go in depth about more of those aspects at some point. But no, I also want to know how long has Cooper's Crumbs been in business?
So technically, Cooper's Crumbs has been in business since about March. We filed for the legal limited liability company, the LLC, in March. But I mean, this has been like kind of a project of mine for probably about 2 years now, more or less. But I formally, since March, that's when we got the LLC. We filed for the tax situation and the bank account and things like that, and we running our website. So I would say since March, but it's been a long time coming.
How come you chose to register as an LLC?
So I think for where I was holding, I didn't have in terms of a C corp, like you have to have shareholders and double taxation and things like that.
Yeah.
Especially
with the company's taxed, but you're also taxed on the income you make from the company.
income. Yeah. No, that's. So I actually spoke to a lawyer about it, and I told him like my situation and where we were holding, and he suggested the LLC to start. And if I do take on partners, we can restructure the agreement. But right now we're at an LLC just because of the ease of the taxation situation and the filing, and also just getting it off the ground. An LLC is, I think, easier to get off the ground and less costly than a C corp or an S corp. But yeah, it was my 2 cents, and then also I went to a second opinion to help out with that. So
For viewers who are less familiar with the formalities of business organization, there are many different forms. There's a sole proprietorship, where basically one person owns the business, and that person is basically treated as the business. Then there are corporations, which have, as Raphi mentioned, the double taxation, and also there are a lot of obligations for record keeping, and you need to have shareholders. Limited liability company, that form of organization is actually relatively recent, and it comes with a lot of perks. There's not much that you're obligated to do, so you have kind of the luxury of dictating things your own way, like a sole proprietorship, but at the same time you also have the liability of a corporation, because you're not personally liable. The government can't come after your assets, only the company assets.
Yeah.
So I feel like that will probably play a big role in giving people more independence and starting their own companies. How have you seen your business grow? I mean, you mentioned that you just got to some stores. Have you seen any sales growth?
Yeah, no, thank God. We just got into our first store about 2 weeks ago, and so far we've sold to the store about 72 of the bags.
Oh, that's fantastic.
In 2 weeks. So yeah, no, it's been great. Also online we've seen growth, not as much as I'd love, but with advertising, with word of mouth, and with familiarity, I think people will jump on board and start buying, because online we do offer free shipping. So that is a big perk. So you could be out in Arizona and there's no store that offers Cooper's Crumbs for the moment, and you can grab life by the horns and order for yourself. But it's been a process, and we're hoping to get into more stores and see more growth, and go to trade shows and food festivals and things like that. But right now we're really trying to focus one place at a time. Because I guess I am only one person. There is only so much I can do, but yeah, no, it's been a whirlwind for sure.
If your business grows, eventually you might be able to hire more people.
Yeah.
So
no, that's the I'm hoping that we'll get to a point where I do need to hire someone, because making a bag of this does require a fair amount of labor and time. So I'm hoping we get to that point where we have enough stores, where there's 4 or 5 stores, and we're gonna have to making 280 bags a week, let's say, and then I only have 2 hands, so
right.
I don't plan on growing another hand to help out with it. So yeah, no, God willing, we'll get to that point.
So I want to go more in depth about the formalities of the legal requirements for handling this. What kind of regulations did you need to follow to create this business, and compared to the other challenges, the marketing, the technicalities of setting up the website, how big of a hurdle would you say getting past those was?
So I think with food, I think regulations it's a big thing, and I think it can really make or break you, especially when you get to a point where you're growing. I've had some help with different lawyers, and there are people I know in the food industry who have given me their 2 cents in terms of what to do when, and what kind of things you're going to have to follow, because if you just go on like the FDA website, it is kind of complicated what exactly you would have to be doing. So we filed for the LLC. Right now we're in the process of filing for the technical, like food service license, food handler's license, and things like that. Also, the FDA applications also. So we're in the process of applying for all those formalities, and so those are all like definitely hurdles, but we'll get through them. It's something you have to do. It's something that will ultimately pay off in the long run in terms of allowing growth and allowing other stores to pick you up, and to really become a national brand, you have to be in line with the law. So right now we're working on that. We're figuring all that out, and there's a lot of work to be done, but it will get done ultimately.
I'm sure it will. This is a political show, so I guess I would like to tie a little political angle into this. Larry Sharpe is a libertarian candidate for governor of New York.
Okay.
And one of the things that he is campaigning on is that he wants to reform certain regulations, because he's arguing that it's getting harder for small businesses to compete with corporations because it's harder for them to get past those regulations. But I'd like to ask you, because since you're a business owner, would you say that this was a significant hurdle, or would you say that this was that the regulations were pretty reasonable?
I think for the most part they have been pretty reasonable. I mean, listen, if you're handling refrigerated food, like, you know, someone's life really is on the line, and labeling practices. I mean, look, if someone has an allergy, then I should have to dictate, you know, that there is nuts in this, that there is tree nuts in this, and when we come out with our pumpkin seed line, then I should have to dictate that this is made in the same facility that tree nuts are made in. So I do think a lot of regulations do make sense, and I think when people come out with, you know, kind of fighting words on regulations, they're trying to make it seem like they're there for the small businesses, but I think ultimately the ones who really do end up violating a lot of federal regulations are these large companies like fossil fuel companies and you know, poultry and beef farmers, that they're not small little independent businesses anymore. Those are large conglomerates nowadays.
Yeah. They're not following the regulations.
No.
They might be following some, but not many.
Ultimately the getting rid of a regulation on that and lower and not requiring a minimum wage, like he's campaigned on for tipped workers and restaurant workers, like those aren't ultimately, I think, gonna hurt small businesses like he says. I think those are really there to help. Those are gonna benefit the larger corporations, because those are also the ones who have the money to lobby for something like this. But I think with the product that I've been working on, I think the regulations do seem, you know, for the most part reasonable. Yeah, I mean, of course, I understand the animosity to it, but I think a lot of it is misdirected.
Of course, it's important to consider that Raphi Cooper is opening a very specific type of business, and so in order to get a feel for how reasonable the regulations really are, we need to interview a lot of different business owners. But I'm glad to have gotten your perspective on it, and hopefully we can have Larry Sharp on the show and I could ask him about his stance on this issue. So moving back to the business. Oh, and another thing too, if automation is actually going to help consumers, we need regulations. That way, you know, if it's going to help both people like you who are able or more able to, more easily able to start your own business, but in doing so, we're going to do, if we do that by just getting rid of regulations, that kind of defeats the purpose of helping the consumer.
Yeah.
By lowering prices, because the prices may be lower, but you know, you're gonna get sick, and you're gonna spend a lot of money on medical bills. Anyway, are there any other? So there was the legal challenges, which seem reasonable, as you said. There's, you know, the challenge of I'm sure the time. You know, you mentioned you only have two hands. Are there any other challenges you'd want to talk about?
I think kind of just, you know, staying positive about it when things do get tough, or when you run into a customer who says they're allergic to nuts, or someone, listen, you know, everyone has their own kind of palate, and, you know, people may say, like, I was at a fair this weekend, and so someone tried our original 4-spice salute, which is, you know, pretty basic. Like, it tastes great, but it's nothing like too over the top. And an older woman tried it, and she goes, "Oh, that's way too spicy for me." But I mean, there's nothing spicy about it. But and then she's like, "Well, you should just make a plain flavor, like of just ground almonds." So, you know, when people, I guess, like, give you suggestions or kind of give feedback that you weren't expecting, and you know it's probably not gonna necessarily, I guess, change the way you do things. Sometimes you get, like, defeated with it, like, you know, you think, like, well, maybe I'm not doing the right thing. So you gotta keep pushing. Yeah, you have to keep pushing, and you have to stay motivated, because in the long run, like, you know, it does pay off 100%. But, you know, in the moment, like, it could be hard to stay like positive. Or if you go to a store and you're like, "Oh, are you guys interested? Like, you guys seem like a health food store," and they're like, "Oh no, we're okay. Like, we don't think this would do well here." So, like, just kind of believing in yourself and believing in the core mission of the product goes a long way. And but it's not easy. You know, it's also easier said than done.
Also, I think it's important. Imagine it's important to look at the big picture, right? Like, just because there are always going to be haters out there.
Yeah.
So
No,
look,
for sure.
and the haters are usually more vocal than the people who approve of the product.
Yeah.
That's why
No,
when you look at
100%.
college reviews of college professors, it's all like hate comments that get followed by one like, "What are they talking about?"
Yeah.
Have any other general comments you'd like to say?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a really great process, I think, to go through so far. Like I said, it has its challenges. It's tough. But I think I'm ultimately excited for what could be. Like, you know, there's so much creativity that there could be out there with a business. And like just in your mind, I think always having that ultimate goal of having it out there and having people having access to it, you know, which is the main purpose that I kind of went after this. This really gives people a choice in what they're eating. And I think ultimately, like, a lot of people take it for granted, but you know, there are people there who can't eat gluten, who are diabetic, who, you know, are looking for something that needs to be low in carbs because they're trying to lose weight, or they're predisposed to type 2 diabetes or heart disease. So I think just, you know, always kind of remembering the core mission of what you're trying to do. And yeah, like you said, looking at the big picture, not only in terms of like whether people like it, but also in terms of what you're ultimately trying to do and where you're trying to get. So,
And let me just get one more thing clear. I've known you for a while, and I've seen you. You've brought me breaded chicken with some prototypes of this product before. It seemed to me like you were originally, like, your focus is not on the business. Your original focus was on, you're passionate about low carb, about health and a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's so great that, you know, obviously you put a lot of work into this, but that you were able to start your own business here. And I feel like if we include more education towards fostering entrepreneurial skills, we could really do a lot of people in this country a big favor, because they'll be able to cultivate their talent and monetize it.
Yeah. No, you feel tremendously enabled when you're able to put something out there that people appreciate and people would pay money for. That's the ultimate test. If what you're putting out, that people will buy it. And I think entrepreneurship is such a great thing because you have that freedom and you have that creativity and you have that ability to tell yourself what you're going to do today and what stores you're going to deliver to and how many bags you're going to make. Like, it's that basic fundamental freedom, I think, that a lot of people miss, unfortunately. But, you know, I hope that it really comes back into style and that, you know, it continues to gain popularity amongst college students, but even amongst adults who are out of a job because of automation, to really reinvent themselves. And I think that's what entrepreneurship really comes down to, because, you know, let's say someone doesn't like one of my flavors and I have to reinvent myself and figure out what can we do to do better. And I think that's what ultimately successful entrepreneurship is that ability to innovate and constantly figure out, you know, what comes next. So it's definitely a pleasure.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. You can buy your own bag of Cooper's Crumbs on www. Three W's. CoopersCrumbs.com. Thank you for joining us, Raphi.
Thank you so much. Yeah, check out our website. There's recipes on there for anything from chicken cutlets to breaded zucchini, which is great. I highly recommend it. You can also check out our Instagram at Cooper's Crumbs, or our Facebook page, Cooper's Crumbs. We keep it pretty generic with that. But thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And you're doing great things here, and continue what you're doing.
Thank you. Will do. You continue what you're doing. In the future, we'll be discussing topics like the war in Afghanistan, the impact of Trump's tariffs on the global economy and international peace, and we'll soon begin covering the week's news in a new segment called Brehl Brief. Thanks for watching.